I think we're there. Okay, hopefully we have dragons. Is anybody, I can see the Slack channels. Anyone seeing the dragons, or at least the front page of the screen of this screen here?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, great. Yes. So there's a good demo of what happens with dragons is when things don't go well. Okay, perfect. So we had a speaker back about 6 months ago at Midwest PHP, and Dr. Brown noted that there is a very high rate of burnout in our industry, and I've certainly seen that also. And really, the Dragons talk that I'm giving today is kind of my answer to that. So, and by the way, I should mention my very, very first CakeFest talk a few years ago was rated the most technical, and this time I'm doing dragons. So I think that's a cool progression. Okay, so what are we really here for? I have an agenda. So we're going to talk about gatekeepers and dragons and imposters and wizards and product managers. Very technical talk. You can see that. So what brought this about? What brought this talk about is the fact that I've seen this on Twitter. I've seen this in books and blog posts, discussions, and I've seen it on projects in person. What I call a very strong tendency, what I call gatekeeping. And by that, I mean, the code base is so fragile that you don't dare let anybody touch it. And so the senior developers warn that there's problems out there, what I call there be dragons. And so it's a hands-off policy, and especially towards the crucial areas of the code base, lest something bad happen, because it probably will. And my answer is that you and I need to get past that. So in my view, where's the fun when you can't touch the dragons? So let's keep going. Once upon a time, there was a rather well-known book. It's a very deep dive into advanced programming in the Unix environment. And it became so popular that there was a second edition. And on the second edition, the culture was such that they put a Dilbert cartoon on the front cover of the book. So I'm going to read you the cartoon. And it says, "Computer Holy Wars. Hold it right there, buddy. That scruffy beard, those suspenders, that smug expression. You're one of those condescending Unix computer users. Here's a nickel, kid. Get yourself a better computer." And that was the culture at the time. And we had something that was called, basically called the Unix Guru. Luckily, that person kind of doesn't exist anymore because software has gotten that much more complex. But there was a Unix Guru, and you had to earn the ability to actually visit that person. Eventually, I did, and I felt it was important. So I visited the Guru with a question, and he responded, "It's in the man page." Now, the man pages are, this is long before Google or even DMOZ. And so the man pages were the online documentation for the Unix, similar to what's now called Linux system. And so his answer was, "It's in the man page." So I went and looked again, and sure enough, it was in the man page. At some point later, I actually made a second visit to the Guru, and this had to do with file system checks. When editing, FSCK, editing the root file system in single user mode, no big deal, but you can break things really badly, and there are some weirdnesses involved. And so I asked, and I got the answer, "It's in the man page." And so back then, we considered this mentoring. My mission at this point, you can tell, was to figure out which man page. No such thing as Google search. So it was up to me to do my homework again and figure this out, knowing that it is in the man page somewhere. Finally, I made a third visit. And this time I was dealing with an empty data structure that had been passed to a system call into the Unix kernel, and eventually then passed to my device driver. And so I went and asked the Guru about what was happening with this empty data structure. And he said, "It's in the man page." I then was able to tell him, well, I looked here, and I looked here, and I looked here, I looked there, and there, and there, and there, and I looked over there. That's the only places I could find to look, and it's not there. So we thought about that a minute. And he announced, it's in the code. Duh, it's in the code. Well, I showed him the code. I was learning. I showed him the code. And at that point, we actually had a conversation finally. And he agreed, okay, yes, walked through it. Yes, there is a problem in this case. And so then he fixed the Unix kernel, and I fixed them. And then I added to the man page, and that's what we considered mentoring. So from the guru's standpoint, he did not want to dumb down the discussion for his audience. The idea is if you want to work with the guru, you need to rise to his or her level, not the other way around. You're expected to work for it just like the guru did in the first place. In other words, show them a willingness to pay your dues. And I think that's not right. In thinking back in retrospect, that is gatekeeping. It is very elitist. It is exclusive. It is not encouraging, and it is a way of shutting people out. And it's okay. It's not good. So I have a better way, which is it's nothing new. Sir Isaac Newton famously quoted, "If I have seen further than others, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants." So what does that mean? It means that as the modern guru, you bring people up to your level in the small things, the big things, but it's on you to explain over and over. It's on you to bring them up to where you are and not the other way around. Remember, you're the guru. That means that, you don't lose anything by explaining things. You've got nothing to lose. You've got nothing, you're not going to lose your status or anything else by bringing people up. So work within the other person's context. You can do that, right? You're the guru. An easy example is helping a family member with phone privacy settings and explaining over and over, and helping develop changed habits. It takes time. You're the guru. Excuse me. So thinking about software as a craft, you don't extend the craft by expecting everyone to pay their dues like you did. You extend the craft by helping other people exceed what you know, exceed your own mastery. In other words, yours is the shoulder of giants, and it's on you to help others see further. But what if you're not the guru? Okay. Frank Herbert talks about that in the famous book Dune back in 1965. And so I'm going to quote it to you. Many marked the speed with which Paul learned the necessities of the planet Dune. The teachers, of course, knew the basis for the speed. For the others, we can say that Paul learned rapidly because his first training was in how to learn. And the first lesson of all was the basic trust that he actually could learn. It is shocking to find how many people do not believe that they can learn and how many more believe learning to be difficult. Paul knew that every experience carries its lesson, and I'll be coming back to that. Every experience carries its lesson. There's a quick snapshot over on the right of my upstairs bookshelf. That stack on the middle left, I kind of call that my L1 book cache. It changes pretty rapidly. Pull books off, put them on. The whole set of 4 shelves is kind of my L2 cache of books, and I've got bins and boxes of books in the basement because I learned that my way of learning. Somebody caught the Nickelback joke. I'm glad. Thank you, Paul. Okay. My way of learning is from books. Your way of learning is probably going to be different. And certainly hands-on also, but a major way for me is books. So when I need to learn something, I head for books. And that's why I've got a lot of them. But we're going to have fun with the dragons. I'm going to give you an example. And here, the problem to solve is, how do you find and fix a problem you can't reproduce? There may be people listening to me right now that have had trouble because a problem showed up once and we just can't reproduce it. It happens. So there's a technique that I call finding patterns in the noise. So I'm going to tell you a story, describe it, and see if that helps a little bit. what happened was there was a problem with a very important customer of ours. We were the vendor, Cray Research, and there was a problem and just couldn't reproduce it. And so that brought it down to two of us because the software was written by two of us, Alex and I, and so we were the only two people on the planet that would know what to do about this. So naturally, I got designated to head on out, and so I was handed an airline ticket. This is mid 1990s at this point. An actual paper airline ticket and a car rental reservation. So I looked at it, and there was a piece of information missing here. So I explained to my boss, whose name is Susan, and by the way, my wife's name is also Susan, so in my case, you need to be really, really careful to not make any ambiguous references to Susan. It might not go well. Anyway, so I asked Susan, well, great, I know how to fly, I know how to get in and I know how to rent a car, but where do I drive it? I said, oh, to the NSA, National Security Agency. Okay, where's that? Fort Meade, and she immediately gave me driving directions from the airport. And the people around me in our group at that point, it was very clear that everyone else knew how to get to Fort Meade and had how to drive there. And so clearly there'd been a lot of software trips to Fort Meade and nobody talked about it. So when I got there and got escorted up to the developer area and found the guy that we referred, because Get Smart, the TV show was popular, we always asked him if he was calling from his shoe phone and referred to him as Agent 86. At our end in Minnesota, we thought that was hilarious. We're not so sure about the other end, so I didn't call him Agent 86 when I met him. But it was very common back then, before cell phones, to make a call home to let the family know that you arrived. So I asked if I could do that. And they said, sure. And they pointed to a desk with two phones on it and said, with a green phone and a red phone. And they said, don't use the red phone, use the green phone, please. Okay, that made sense. Batman was also still popular, so I knew what a bat phone looked like. So called home and told wife Susan that, yes, I was arrived, everything's fine. And no, I, of course, couldn't tell her where I was. However, they gave me this beautiful glass mug with a gold rim to bring home as a keepsake. And on the front of it, it says National Security Agency. So jaws dropped all over the room. And that might not have been the best way to start out the day. But when my son eventually heard the story, he noted, I'm not sure if there's anything more stereotypical than that. You can't say where you are. You sign the non-disclosure agreement, so you don't tell people where you were. But here's this commemorative cup or hat. And I'm sure others have found that as well. Okay, the problem had to do with tapes. Back then we called them round tapes. On the left there is a picture of a 2,400-foot 9-track tape reel. And so the problem was, back then the tape controllers, the tapes were read on a tape drive, and then they're connected by these thick, about that thick cables, gray, called bus and tag cables. But the cable run could only be about 200 feet. So this other vendor came by, and this is the announcement from 1991. Google is wonderful these days in that sense. You can find digitized things. And we're talking mid-1990s. And so they had channel extenders, which would then sit in the middle. And so now the tape drive could actually be in a different building even, and you'd never know the difference. So the software, arrow number 2 at the bottom center, the software emulates an IBM channel control program over the wide area connection, giving full channel speed. That's a very difficult thing to do at the time. And promise number 3, we behave as if we're the true mainframe channel. That's the marketing spin. And of course, that wasn't really true. That's why I had to fly out and drive to NSA. So back to the tape drives. Something was going wrong, and my software was blowing up saying this is not a valid tape transfer. And we couldn't catch it and fix it. We couldn't find out what was going on. So and the trouble is, of course, you're not going to be sending software or dumps or anything else in and out of the NSA. It's just not going to happen. So went out there, added, made a little patch so that the operator console would display error information if this error occurred. And then it was up to us to sit in the computer room, watching the screen, and see if the error ever occurred. And so that was going to be like overnight, and turned into several nights. So just watching for something to show up on the screen. So what are we going to do about that? I had an escort, obviously, and because I was an uncleared person. If you turn on the back of the tape, this is the upper right hand photo, is something called a write ring, W-R-I-T, write ring. If the ring is in, there's two in the picture there. If the ring is in, then the tape drive will write to the magnetic tape. If you take the ring out, then it's a read-only tape, just like a read-only database mirror. And naturally, back then, with lots and lots of tape drives in the room, there were also lots and lots and lots of those write rings, like just around in boxes. So we took the floor puller, pulled a couple tiles from the raised floor, maybe 20 yards apart from each other. And that night we used the write rings and we played horseshoes. The two pulled tiles were the horseshoe pits. Of course, we were on camera in this spotless computer room in the center of NSA headquarters, and there we were playing horseshoes all night. We needed something to do and stay awake. Nobody ever said a thing. And by the way, of course, it never happened because the agency does not actually exist. Okay, so what really happened? We eventually found something wrong, a weird pattern. And what it was as data was coming across the channel, there would be this marker that says, okay, this is the beginning of data, data is going to follow, and then you'd have the data block, and then you'd have the end marker. And what happened was we saw the begin marker, and then nothing, and then another begin marker, and then the data, and then the end. Well, that's an illegal sequence, but we caught the illegal sequence. So what did that mean? We looked and looked, and so we talked to the vendor, Network Systems, and they looked into the situation and decided that what they were doing was error recovery. So, and yeah, they could eventually come up with a patch. Well, okay, we needed to fix now. And of course, this is the NSA, and it takes a while to get a patch in. But I was right there. So what I did was I put a patch in. Now that we know what the situation is, we know it's okay, we know why. I put a patch in that would just allow this to happen. And of course, that patch became the permanent fix. So, but the point of the story here is for us to find that pattern, we needed to understand those channel commands. So what I'm showing you right now is from the tape subsystem maintenance manual. You're looking at page 8 of 162 pages that look just like this. Exactly what bits are going down the bytes, down the wire, what the timing is, what the sequence of the different commands are, and so on. And it is ugly. But if we didn't know it, we wouldn't have found it. So we spotted a sequence that should not be there. And so what we did was we spotted a wrong pattern in the noise. And I don't know how to teach that skill, but it's an extremely useful skill if you can develop it. I do have a theory about developing the skill. You're not going to like it, but I have a theory. Achieve weirdness. As you achieve weirdness in the process, you get better at spotting other weirdness. And what that means is you'll get better and better at finding the problems or bugs that nobody else can, because you're better at spotting weirdness. That's my theory. But remember, the process starts by gaining the skills. A lady goes by the name of Aziria wrote a very excellent tutorial on the process, a blog post on the process of mastering a skill. And so what she wrote was, prodigy or expert? Have you ever wondered what separates experts from everyone else? And I don't mean the self-proclaimed experts who value status over learning. I mean the true geniuses of our industry who know their field extraordinarily well and have spent decades honing their skills. How do these successful people master their field? Is it a natural talent they were born with, or do they have a magic trick that only a few know about? And that's where I bring over the elephant, of course, it's magic. So when performance psychologists studied what distinguishes experts across several different fields, they kept coming across the same answer in every field. It's deliberate practice. And by the way, she's also on Twitter as Fox0x01. Okay. So my point, once you're the expert, have fun with it. Plan on having fun with it. We played horseshoes in the NSA machine room, but of course, it doesn't exist, so it didn't really happen. But you need to expect to put in the work to become the expert. Expect to always be learning, and remember that, and that's because our industry evolves. Remember from Dune that every experience carries its lesson. From that, you're going to gain that been there, done that confidence as you put the work to continue learning over and over and over again. It's continuous learning. Okay, so yes, I did. I laid on the expert business a bit thick for a reason. Oh, stop doing things, mouse. There we go. Okay, imposter syndrome. It's very common in our industry, and that includes myself. So here's the definition. It's a pattern of behavior where people doubt their accomplishments. It's persistent, often internalized fear of being exposed as a fraud. And despite having adequate internal evidence of accomplishments, people with imposter syndrome remain convinced they don't deserve the success they have. So my own experience was roughly age 10 to age 30. My imposter syndrome told me, this is my variation, that since I'd been studying computers longer than anyone else around me, remember this is the 1960s and 70s, I had to be better than everyone else combined, or I was a failure. And you should laugh because you know it doesn't work that way, except my brain was saying it does. So my solution was to pay it forward. Yours might be different, but my solution was to pay it forward. I could help someone else, even if they knew more than me, and I learned more in the process. Paying it forward made it okay. That was my solution of getting past imposter syndrome. An example was when I went into software training. So I was the new would-be instructor. Well, due to a car accident, suddenly I had to step in as the operating system internals instructor for the first time, and boy, I wasn't ready. So I found out on Saturday, class was going to be 2 weeks in assembler and octal, and it started Monday. We had no other options, so there I was. So I stepped in as an imposter, and I said I was the instructor for 2 weeks. Didn't tell anybody that I was the imposter. So at the end of class, the standard procedure was I would step out, the manager would come in to solicit course feedback and hand out a paper survey. And so before he did, I explained that this was my very first time teaching the course. It happened unexpectedly. I wasn't ready. Well, I didn't say that part, but I would greatly appreciate any suggestion at all for better teaching the course next time around. I was very sincere about that. What I didn't know was I was in effect stacking the deck. I got maximum survey scores from every student, which was extremely unusual in that context. And so I stacked the deck, but what happened was imposter syndrome began to fade away for me. So it became okay that the other instructors were more experienced than I was because I could still teach. And so the less experience didn't make me an imposter, even though I felt like it. I was teaching how things worked, even though those who wrote that software knew more about it than I did. And of course, my students knew more than me. They were sending the best of the best to come to us to learn how to run a Cray supercomputer. So, but I represented the company to them. And so I was the imposter. So it took me 20 years to get past that. And 30 years later, it's obviously still with me. And so that's why I feel I have to pay it forward. When I'm paying it forward, I don't have to worry about whether I'm the best person to pay it forward or not. I just do it whether I am or not. When you've been there, done that, gain the experience, you can provide the shoulder for others to stand on, even if your brain thinks you're an imposter. You can still do it. Okay, finally. I want to talk about what I call wizard thinking because literally at Cray Research, I lived amongst the wizards for for 20 plus years. Doesn't mean I'm a wizard, but I lived among them. And so the attitude I gained was, when you realize that what you're doing is important, then specific details like actually writing the software will just take care of themselves. That, as I say it, that sounds dismissive, and but it's not. I don't mean it that way. What I mean is, it's wizard thinking based on the expectation of lifelong learning. Okay, next project or next problem. Okay, I'm going to have to learn something in order to solve this or develop this. And okay, I have taught myself how to learn. So go out and learn it. And then, of course, the software becomes an artifact. And so in my view, this sort of wizard thinking expresses a love of the craft. And so those are my thoughts on wizard thinking. However, wizard thinking has a dark side. This is a quote from Ed Post in 1983. This is not new. As long as there are ill-defined goals, bizarre bugs, and unrealistic schedules, there will be real programmers willing to jump in and solve the problem, saving the documentation for later. We now call these real programmers Tedx developers because it takes 10 developers to clean up the mess. Some of you will have encountered such a person. So finally, go back to thinking about on the shoulders of giants, the idea of building trust and earning trust. For example, if you join an open source project, the Cake PHP open source project, for example, it's going to take a year for you to really develop trust, because the other developers know some are just going to take off like a rocket, totally excited, and never return. And of course, many newbies just want all the answers now. And by the way, don't be that person. So learn to learn. Learn how you best learn so that you can put in the work and gain the skills. With me, it's books. With you, it's going to be something else. Expect to be continuously learning, and expect that it's going to be up to you. You be the shoulder in the small things, and when the big things come, you'll know what to do. Find ways to help others exceed your own mastery. Take your own ego out of it, tech bros, and help other people to exceed your own mastery. But we need a gatekeeper, because our software is bad. Okay, think about why. It's on you to teach those skills and how to understand the dangers. Do you want to always and forever be the one on call? Well, maybe you do, but I sure don't. But we have a product backlog. We're in the middle of a sprint. We don't have the time to teach the newbies or this person you just hired to fix all the problems. Right, let's talk about that. Von Vernon, who wrote the famous Red Book for Domain-Driven Design, in the preface itself wrote, "It seems to me that Scrum and other agile techniques are being used as substitutes for careful modeling, where a product backlog is thrust at developers as if it serves as a set of designs. No matter how many project and product managers would like to keep you marching on a relentless path of continuous delivery, Scrum was not meant only as a means to keep Gantt chart enthusiasts happy. I consider this a big problem." That's what Vernon wrote. In other words, and what I have found is in many, many projects, the PHP people have zero ability to push back. They've got zero power. They're on a contract, whatever. It is not going to happen. Okay, so be it. You can still guide your career. You can still be responsible for your career. By the way, the Jacob that I mentioned earlier, he's in my lab in this photo with the Apple II Plus. Okay, so lay out your own path to always be learning, gain a serious skill of deliberate practice. Remember that every experience carries its lesson, and the point is to think like a wizard and have fun. So what it comes down to is, if I have seen further than others, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants. And I'd like to picture that as future you just chilling amongst the dragons. That's it. I've got 37 seconds for questions.